The gunshot ripped through the evening air as Zara Whitman's trembling hands steadied the rifle. Blood pooled around the rattlesnake's severed head as tears streamed down her dirt-stained cheeks. It wasn't the snake that made her cry. It was the memory of everything she'd lost in the past year that threatened to swallow her whole, standing there alone on the vast Texas plains of 1876. "Nice shot," came a low, approving voice from behind. Zara spun around, rifle still clutched in her hands, to find a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. A man on horseback, his Stetson pulled low over his eyes, sat watching her from 20 paces away. "You been following me?" she demanded, not lowering her weapon. The stranger raised his hand slowly. "No, madam, just happened upon you while tracking some strays." His voice had a gentle quality that contradicted his rugged appearance. "Might want to point that rifle elsewhere, though." Zara kept the gun trained on him for another few seconds before reluctantly lowering it. "This is private property." "Is it now?" The man dismounted with fluid grace that spoke of years in the saddle. "That's peculiar, considering I purchased the Triple T Ranch 3 weeks ago." "Which would make you the trespasser." There was no malice in his tone, just simple fact. Zara felt the color drain from her face. The Triple T had been her neighbor's land for as long as she could remember. Old man Thompson had promised to give her notice if he ever sold. "I'm Flynn Thornton," the stranger said, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair and eyes the color of warm bourbon. "And you must be Zara Whitman. My family owned the Silverbrook Ranch just east of here." Her voice caught on the past tense. "I thought this land was still Thompson's. He sold it to me before heading to California. His joints couldn't take another Texas winter." Flynn studied her face with an intensity that made Zara uncomfortable. "You all right, Miss Whitman? You seem—" "I'm fine," she said sharply, wiping away the remnants of tears with her sleeve. "Just dealing with unwanted visitors, both the slithering kind and otherwise." Flynn's mouth quirked into a half-smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Fair enough, but it's getting dark. Not safe for a woman to be out alone." "I've managed just fine for months now," Zara replied coldly, though the truth was far more complicated. Nothing had been fine since the raid that had taken her parents and left their ranch in ruins. Nothing had been fine since she discovered that surviving was sometimes worse than dying. Flynn nodded slowly. "Would you allow me to escort you home at least? Then I'll be on my way." Zara hesitated. She'd learned the hard way not to trust strangers, especially men who appeared out of nowhere, but something about his steady gaze made her reconsider. Besides, the shadows were lengthening, and she was still a good mile from what remained of her homestead. "Fine," she conceded reluctantly, "but I'll ride my own horse." Flynn nodded, whistling softly. From the brush emerged a copper-colored mare that Zara hadn't noticed before. "This is Ember," Flynn said, patting the horse's neck. "Where's your mount?" "Just over that rise," Zara gestured. "I'll meet you there." As she walked toward where she'd left her horse, she felt Flynn's eyes on her back. Not in the predatory way she'd grown to fear from men, but with something like concern or curiosity. It made her shoulder blades itch with discomfort. When she returned on her gray gelding, Flynn was waiting patiently. They rode in silence for several minutes before he spoke again. "You said owned, past tense, the Silverbrook Ranch." Zara stiffened in her saddle. "Not much gets past you, does it? Occupational hazard, I notice things." "And what occupation would that be, Mr. Thornton?" "Was a Texas Ranger for 8 years. Before that, cavalry during the war." That explained his watchful eyes and the way he sat his horse, alert even in repose. It didn't explain why such a man would be buying a ranch out here in the middle of nowhere. "The ranch is mine now," Zara said carefully. "My parents are gone." Flynn didn't push for details, which she appreciated. Instead, he asked, "You running it alone?" A humorless laugh escaped her. "Running it? No, surviving it is more accurate." They crested a small hill, and the charred remains of the main house came into view. The bunkhouse and barn had been partially rebuilt, but the work had clearly stalled. Flynn let out a low whistle. "Raiders?" he asked quietly. Zara nodded, throat tight. 8 months ago. As they approached what remained of the Silverbrook, Flynn could see that she had converted part of the barn into living quarters. A small vegetable garden struggled nearby, and a few skinny cattle grazed in a far pasture. "You've been living here alone since the attack." There was no pity in his voice, just a question. "The hands left after my parents were killed. Can't blame them. No pay, no future." Zara dismounted, keeping her back straight despite the exhaustion that seemed to permeate her very bones. "Thank you for the escort, Mr. Thornton." "You can be on your way now." Flynn remained on his horse, surveying the property with a practiced eye. "Miss Whitman, I don't mean to overstep, but this isn't safe. Not for anyone, especially not a woman alone." Zara's eyes flashed dangerously. "I've made it this far." "By the skin of your teeth, from the look of things." Flynn finally dismounted, tying Ember to a post. "Let me help you." "I don't need your help or your charity." The words came out sharper than she intended, not offering either. Flynn removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "I'm offering a business proposition. I need help getting the Triple T operational. You know this land better than I do." Zara crossed her arms. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "A partnership of sorts. I have capital and manpower coming in. You have knowledge and—" He hesitated. Determination. "You don't know the first thing about me. I know you survived something that would have broken most people. I know you're still fighting when many would have given up." His eyes held hers. "And I know that pride won't feed your cattle or rebuild your home." The truth of his words stung like a slap. Zara turned away, unwilling to let him see how deeply they cut. "Think about it," Flynn said softly. "I'll come back tomorrow. We can discuss terms." Before she could formulate a response, he was back on his horse, tipping his hat to her before riding away. Zara watched him go, a mixture of suspicion and desperate hope warring within her. That night, as she lay on her makeshift bed in the corner of the barn, she stared at the rafters and admitted a truth she'd been denying for months. She couldn't do this alone. The bank had given her until the end of summer to repay her father's loans, and the meager herd she'd managed to round up after the raid wouldn't fetch half what she needed. Flynn Thornton's offer might be her only chance. That didn't mean she had to like it or him. Morning brought no clarity, just the same grinding tasks that filled each day. Zara was hauling water from the well when she spotted a cloud of dust on the horizon. Not just one rider this time, but several. She hurried inside for her rifle. By the time the group reached her property, she was waiting on the porch, weapon in plain view. Flynn led the party, followed by 4 men who bore the unmistakable look of ranch hands. "Morning, Miss Whitman," Flynn called, raising a hand in greeting. "I've brought some help." Zara didn't lower her rifle. "I don't recall agreeing to anything. Consider this a gesture of good faith." Flynn dismounted, motioning for the men to do the same. "These are my new hands. Just arrived from San Antonio yesterday. Thought they might help with some repairs while we talk." The men removed their hats respectfully. They were a motley crew: an older man with a silver-streaked beard, 2 middle-aged cowboys with weathered faces, and a younger Mexican man who couldn't be much older than 20. "This is Hank, my foreman," Flynn said, indicating the older man. "And Jesse, Tom, and Miguel, all experienced ranch hands." Hank stepped forward. "Miss Whitman, Mr. Thornton told us what happened here. We'd be honored to help if you'll allow it." Zara hesitated, pride warring with practicality. The barn roof desperately needed patching before the summer storms came, and the corral fencing was barely holding together. "Fine," she relented, finally lowering the rifle. "But this doesn't mean I'm accepting your proposition, Mr. Thornton." Flynn smiled. "Of course not. Hank, why don't you and the boys start on that roof? I see some shingles missing." As the men set to work, Flynn gestured to a small table Zara had set up outside the barn. "May we sit?" Reluctantly, she joined him, keeping a careful distance between them. Up close, she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, a man who spent most of his time outdoors. "Why are you doing this?" she asked bluntly. Flynn leaned back in his chair. "Straight to the point. I appreciate that." He seemed to consider his words carefully before continuing. "When I bought the Triple T, Thompson told me about your family, about what happened." Zara stiffened. "And what exactly did he say?" "That the Whitmans were good people. That raiders hit your place last fall, killed your parents, burned your home. That you somehow survived and stayed on despite everything." Flynn's eyes met hers. "He said you were too stubborn to leave even when the bank started circling." "Mr. Thompson talked too much," Zara muttered. "Maybe. Or maybe he was worried about you." Flynn leaned forward. "The way I see it, we can help each other. Your land adjoins mine. Between the two properties, we could build something substantial. My land isn't for sale." "I'm not looking to buy it," Flynn clarified. "I'm proposing a partnership, my capital, your local knowledge. We rebuild both ranches, run cattle on both properties, split the profits proportionally." Zara narrowed her eyes. "And who would be in charge of this?" "Partnership. We'd make decisions together. But day-to-day operations, I defer to your experience with this particular terrain." It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. "What's the catch, Mr. Thornton?" "The catch is that you'd have to work with me, trust me to some extent." His mouth quirked. "And from what I've seen so far, you don't particularly like or trust anyone, especially me." Despite herself, Zara felt a small smile threaten. She quickly suppressed it. "You're a stranger who showed up out of nowhere, offering salvation. You can understand my skepticism." "Fair enough." Flynn reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document. "Here are the terms I'm proposing in writing. Take your time, read it over. I'm not looking for an answer today." Zara took the paper cautiously. "You seem awfully confident I'll agree." "Not confident, hopeful." Flynn's expression grew serious. "Miss Whitman, I've seen what happens to people who try to make it alone out here. It rarely ends well." The genuine concern in his voice caught her off guard. Before she could respond, a shout came from the barn. "Mr. Thornton, Miss Whitman, you might want to see this." They both rose quickly and hurried to where Miguel was standing near the back wall of the barn. He pointed to a section of wood where someone had carved a crude symbol, a circle with an X through it. "The Crosshair Gang," Miguel said quietly. "My brother rode with a posse after them 2 years ago." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. It was the same mark she'd seen on one of the raiders' saddles the night of the attack. She'd told the sheriff, but he dismissed it as coincidence. Flynn's expression hardened as he examined the carving. "How long has this been here?" I don't know," Zara admitted. "I haven't been in this part of the barn much." "The Crosshair Gang usually marks properties they intend to return to," Hank said, joining them. "They're not just raiders, they are organized. They hit a place, then come back months later to see what's been rebuilt." Zara felt her knees weaken. She'd suspected the attack wasn't random, but hearing it confirmed made the terror of that night rush back with sickening clarity. Flynn's hand touched her elbow, steadying her. "You all right?" She pulled away, straightening her spine. "I'm fine." "You're not fine," Flynn said quietly, so only she could hear. "Nobody would be fine after learning this. For some reason, his understanding was harder to bear than his pity would have been. Zara turned away, blinking rapidly. "Miss Whitman," Flynn continued, his voice steady, "this changes things. The Crosshair Gang doesn't leave survivors by accident. If they marked your barn, they intended to come back." "You think I don't know that?" she whispered fiercely. "Every night for 8 months I've slept with a loaded rifle beside me, waiting." The men exchanged glances, a silent communication passing between them. "Mr. Thornton," Hank said finally, "with your permission, I think we should stay here tonight, set up a watch." "I agree." Flynn turned to Zara. "Miss Whitman, I know you value your independence, but this isn't about charity or business anymore. This is about survival." Zara wanted to argue, to insist she could handle things herself as she had been for months, but the truth was, she was tired. Bone-weary from constant vigilance, from jumping at shadows, from trying to rebuild a life from ashes. "One night," she conceded reluctantly. "Your men can stay one night." Flynn nodded. "Thank you. Hank, organize a rotation. I want 2 men on watch at all times." As the men dispersed to continue their work with renewed purpose, Zara found herself standing alone with Flynn once more. "This partnership you're proposing," she said quietly, "would it include protection for my land?" "It would," Flynn confirmed. "My men, my resources, helping secure both properties." Zara took a deep breath. "I'll consider it, but I need to know more about you first, Mr. Thornton. Real answers, not just vague references to your Ranger past." "That's fair." Flynn gestured to the house. "Why don't we sit down properly and talk? I'll answer any questions you have." Inside her makeshift living space, Zara busied herself making coffee while Flynn took a seat at her small table. The domesticity of the scene felt strange after months of solitude. "Why did you leave the Rangers?" she asked, placing a steaming cup before him. Flynn wrapped his hands around the mug. "I got tired of arriving too late." Meaning I spent years tracking down men who'd already done their worst, finding bodies instead of saving lives. He took a sip of coffee. "After a while, it wears on you. So you decided to become a rancher. That's quite a change." "My father ran cattle in the Panhandle before the war. I grew up learning the trade before I joined the cavalry." Flynn's eyes grew distant. "Always thought I'd go back to it someday. And the Triple T." "Why here specifically?" Flynn hesitated. "I was tracking the Crosshair Gang. Their pattern led me to this area. When I heard the Thompson place was for sale, it seemed convenient." Zara set down her cup with a thunk. "You knew about the raid on my family before you came here." "Yes," Flynn admitted. "Your family's case crossed my desk before I left the Rangers. It stuck with me because," he paused, seeming to search for the right words, "because the report mentioned a daughter who survived but refused to leave. So I was just part of your investigation." The betrayal stung more than it should have, given how little she knew him. "Initially, yes," Flynn acknowledged. "But then I met you, saw what you were trying to do here all alone. This isn't just about catching criminals anymore, Miss Whitman." Zara stood abruptly, pacing the small space. "You should have told me this yesterday." "Would you have believed me, trusted me?" Flynn challenged. "Or would you have run me off your property with that rifle of yours?" She couldn't deny it. Her first instinct would have been to shut him out completely if he'd admitted he was still playing lawman. "The partnership offer," she said finally. "Is that real or just part of your plan to catch these men?" "It's real," Flynn assured her. "Whatever happens with the Crosshair Gang, I intend to make the Triple T successful. Adding your land and expertise would make that goal more attainable." "And if I refuse?" Flynn met her gaze steadily. "Then I'll still do everything in my power to protect you and catch the men who killed your family. But I think we'd both be better off working together." The sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. Zara sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. "I need time to think," she said. "Take all the time you need." Flynn rose, placing his hat back on his head. "But maybe not too much time. If the Crosshair Gang is planning a return visit, we should be prepared." After he left to join the men working outside, Zara unfolded the document he'd given her. The terms were straightforward and, surprisingly, favorable to her. Flynn was offering a genuine partnership, not a takeover. As the afternoon wore on, the sounds of hammering and men's voices filled the air, sounds she'd once taken for granted, but now seemed almost foreign. By sundown, the barn roof was patched, the corral fence mended, and the men had set up a small camp near the house. Flynn approached as she stood watching the sunset, arms wrapped around herself against the evening chill. "Your men work quickly," she observed. "They're motivated." "Good men, all of them." Flynn stood beside her, not too close. "Hank's been with me for years. The others I hired in San Antonio, but they came highly recommended, and they're all willing to face the Crosshair Gang if they return. They know what they signed up for." Flynn hesitated. "Have you thought about my offer?" Zara turned to face him fully. "I have conditions." A smile tugged at his mouth. "I expected nothing less. My land remains in my name legally, no matter what happens with this partnership." "Agreed." "I want it in writing that if either of us decides to end the arrangement, I retain full ownership of Silverbrook." "Done." "And," Zara took a deep breath, "I want to be involved in bringing these men to justice, the ones who killed my parents. Not just waiting on the sidelines while you and your men handle it." Flynn's expression grew serious. "That's more complicated. It's non-negotiable." He studied her face for a long moment. "You've been hunting them yourself, haven't you? That's why you were out on the range yesterday." Zara didn't deny it. "I've been tracking movements, asking questions in town, not making much progress, but you need to see this through." Flynn nodded slowly. "I understand that better than you might think. All right, Miss Whitman, you'll be part of it. But you follow my lead when it comes to confrontations. I'm not having your death on my conscience." "I can agree to that." Zara extended her hand. "Then we have a deal, Mr. Thornton." Flynn's large hand enveloped hers, warm and calloused. "We do indeed, Miss Whitman." As they stood there, hands clasped in the fading light, Zara felt something shift inside her, not trust exactly, but a tentative opening. For the first time in months, she wasn't completely alone. That night, as she prepared for bed, she could hear the low voices of the men outside, the occasional clink of a coffee cup, the soft nickering of horses. Normal sounds, human sounds. She slept without her rifle in her hands for the first time since the raid. Dawn brought Flynn to her door with news. "My men and I are heading back to the Triple T to get supplies. We'll return by nightfall. All of you." Zara couldn't quite keep the apprehension from her voice. "Miguel will stay," Flynn assured her. "Best shot among us besides me." Zara nodded, relieved despite herself. "I'll use the time to draw up a map of the property, show you where the water sources are, best grazing areas." "Good thinking." Flynn hesitated. "One more thing, the partnership agreement. I've added your conditions." He handed her a revised document. Zara skimmed it, noting the additions exactly as she'd specified. "Thank you. Partners look out for each other's interests," Flynn said simply. "I'll see you this evening." After the men departed, Zara set about her usual chores with Miguel's help. The young man was quiet but efficient, and by midday they'd accomplished twice what she normally managed alone. "How did you come to work for Mr. Thornton?" she asked as they rested in the shade, drinking water from a canteen. Miguel wiped his brow. "He saved my life. Last year in a saloon in Lerdo, some drunk accused me of cheating at cards. Mr. Thornton stepped in, vouched for me. Later, when he heard I was looking for honest work, he hired me. He seems to collect strays, Zara murmured. Miguel grinned. Is that how you see yourself, Miss Whitman? As a stray? The question caught her off guard. No, that's not what I meant. Mr. Thornton is a good man, Miguel said, suddenly serious. There are not many who would put themselves between a gun and a stranger, especially a Mexican one. Before Zara could respond, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention, too early for Flynn and the others to be returning. Inside, Miguel said tersely, reaching for his rifle. Could be nothing, but... Zara grabbed her shotgun and followed him into the barn. Through a crack in the wall, they watched as 3 riders approached the house. Rough-looking men, heavily armed, crosshair gang, she whispered. Miguel shook his head. Cannot say for certain. Scouts, maybe. The men dismounted, looking around the property with obvious interest. One of them peered into the makeshift house while the others examined the freshly repaired corral. Someone's been busy, one called out. Looks like our little survivors got help. Zara's blood ran cold at the confirmation. These were the men who had destroyed her home, murdered her parents. We should take them now, she hissed, raising her shotgun. Miguel caught her arm. 3 of them, 2 of us. Bad odds if we miss. Better to let them go, tell Mr. Thornton what we saw. They killed my family, Zara insisted, struggling against his grip. And they will pay, Miguel promised. But not today, not like this. You die, they win. The logic penetrated her rage. Reluctantly, she lowered the weapon. They watched in tense silence as the men continued their inspection of the property. Whitman's daughter has been busy, the tallest man said. Jackson will want to know about these repairs. Reckon he'll move up the timetable, asked another, likely. Don't want to give whoever's helping her time to fortify the place. The men mounted up and rode away, taking the same trail Flynn and the others had used earlier. Zara sagged against the wall, trembling with suppressed fury and fear. They're heading toward the Triple T, she realized. They could run into Flynn and the others. Mr. Thornton knows how to handle himself, Miguel assured her, though he looked concerned. But we should warn him if we can. The old hunting cabin, Zara said suddenly. It's on the ridge between here and the Triple T. If we ride hard, we might get there before either group passes. They saddled their horses quickly and set off across country, taking a route that cut diagonally across the properties. Zara pushed her gelding hard, fear giving wings to their flight. If the raiders encountered Flynn's group on the trail, they'd be outnumbered. The hunting cabin came into view just as they heard gunshots in the distance. Zara's heart stuttered in her chest. Too late, Miguel muttered, spurring his horse forward. They crested the ridge to see a firefight in progress in the valley below. Flynn and his men had taken cover behind rocks and were exchanging shots with the 3 raiders, who were pinned down behind a fallen tree. Cover me, Zara said, positioning herself on the ridge with her rifle. Miguel nodded, taking up a position beside her. Together, they had a clear view of the raiders' position from above, an advantage the men below didn't realize they had. Zara sighted down her barrel, aiming for the tallest raider. She took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the valley. The man jerked, clutching his shoulder, and fell back. The other raiders looked up in confusion, suddenly realizing they were caught in a crossfire. Give it up, Flynn's voice carried clearly. You're surrounded. One of the raiders made a break for the horses. Miguel's shot kicked up dirt at his feet, stopping him in his tracks. The men below raised their hands in surrender. Flynn and his men quickly secured the raiders, binding their hands. Only then did Flynn look up toward the ridge, shielding his eyes against the sun. Miss Whitman, he called. Is that you up there? It is indeed, Mr. Thornton. She called back, a strange exhilaration flooding her veins. Thought you might need some assistance." As they rode down to join the group, Zara saw Flynn's expression shift from relief to concern. "What are you doing out here?" he demanded as she dismounted. "These men are dangerous." "They came to the ranch," she explained quickly. "Scouting. We heard them talking about someone named Jackson moving up the timetable." Flynn's face darkened. "Jackson, leader of the Crosshair Gang." He turned to the captured men, grabbing the injured one by his shirt. "Where's Jackson planning to hit next? The Silverbrook or the Triple T?" The man spat on the ground. "Go to hell, Ranger." "Former Ranger," Flynn corrected, tightening his grip. "Which means I'm not bound by regulations anymore. Where's Jackson?" Fear flickered in the man's eyes. "Both properties." "He's bringing the whole gang. 30 men at least." Zara felt the blood drain from her face. 30 men. They'd never withstand such an assault. "When?" Flynn demanded. 3 days, maybe 4. "Meeting at the Devil's Backbone first." Flynn released him, turning to Hank. "Get them to the sheriff in Oak Ridge. Tell him they're part of the Crosshair Gang, wanted for murder and robbery across 3 counties. "What about you?" Hank asked. "Miss Whitman and I are heading back to prepare." Flynn's eyes met Zara's. "We've got work to do." As Hank and the others departed with the prisoners, Flynn and Zara rode back toward the Silverbrook with Miguel. 30 men, Zara said numbly. "We can't fight that many." "We're not going to," Flynn replied. "We're going to the Devil's Backbone first." Zara looked at him sharply. "That's suicide." "Not if we're smart about it." Flynn's expression was grimly determined. "The Backbone's a narrow pass, perfect place for an ambush. Even if we get all the men from both ranches, we'd be outnumbered 3-1, which is why we're not waiting for them to assemble." Flynn turned in his saddle to face her. "Jackson will arrive first to scout the meeting place. Standard procedure for gang leaders. That's when we take him." "Cut the head off the snake," Miguel said with grim approval. "Exactly." Flynn looked at Zara intently. "But it's dangerous." "I'll understand if you want to stay behind." Zara straightened in her saddle. "These men killed my parents, burned my home. I'm going." Flynn studied her face for a long moment before nodding. "We leave at first light tomorrow. The Devil's Backbone is a half-day's ride west." That evening, as they prepared for the journey, Zara found herself working alongside Flynn with a strange sense of partnership she hadn't expected. He treated her as an equal, consulting her on the terrain, respecting her knowledge of the area. "You're not what I expected," she admitted as they cleaned their weapons by lamplight. Flynn glanced up. "How so?" "Most men would have ordered me to stay behind. Protected the fragile woman from danger." A smile touched his lips. "Miss Whitman, I've known you for barely 2 days, and even I can see there's nothing fragile about you." The compliment warmed her unexpectedly. "Still, most men wouldn't see it that way. Most men are fools then." Flynn checked the action on his revolver. "I've known plenty of women with more courage than men twice their size. My mother held our ranch alone for 3 years while my father fought in the war. Never complained, never faltered." "You admired her," Zara observed, "more than anyone." His expression softened with memory. "She taught me to judge people by their mettle, not their gender or the color of their skin." "She sounds remarkable." She was. Flynn set his cleaned weapon aside. "Your parents must have been exceptional people too to raise a daughter like you." Zara looked down, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "They were good people, didn't deserve what happened to them." "No one does." Flynn's voice was gentle. "But they'd be proud of you, Zara, surviving, fighting back." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and somehow it broke something loose inside her. Tears she'd held back for months suddenly spilled over. "I don't feel strong," she confessed, the words wrenching from her throat. "Every day is a struggle just to keep going. Sometimes I think I'm just too broken to ever be whole again." Flynn moved beside her, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his warmth. "You're the strongest woman I know, Zara Whitman. Broken things can be mended, and often they're stronger at the joins." She looked up at him through tear-blurred eyes. "How can you be so sure?" "Because I was broken once too," he said simply. "After the war. Thought I'd never find my way back to myself, but I did, and so will you." Something in his steady gaze and the quiet conviction of his words reached a part of Zara that had been numb since the night of the raid. Not healing the wound exactly, but acknowledging that healing was possible. "Thank you," she whispered. Flynn nodded, respecting her emotions without trying to diminish them. They sat in companionable silence until Miguel came to relieve Flynn for the night watch. The next morning dawned clear and cool. They set out before sunrise, Flynn and Zara accompanied by Miguel and Tom, who had returned during the night. Hank and Jesse remained behind to guard the ranch. The Devil's Backbone was a natural formation, a narrow ridge between two steep valleys, creating a passage that travelers had used for generations. It was the perfect place for an ambush from either direction. They approached cautiously, leaving their horses concealed in a stand of trees before proceeding on foot. Flynn took the lead, his movements silent and purposeful. Zara followed close behind, every sense alert. As they neared the ridge, Flynn signaled for them to spread out. Zara took position behind a boulder, rifle ready. Through her scope, she scanned the ridge, looking for any sign of movement. Hours passed in tense silence. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the exposed rock. Sweat trickled down Zara's back, but she remained motionless, disciplined. Just when she thought they might have arrived too early, she caught a flash of movement at the far end of the ridge. A rider, approaching slowly, cautiously. Through her scope, she could make out a tall man with a black beard, a red bandana around his neck. He dismounted, tying his horse to a scrub oak before climbing to a vantage point to survey the area. Zara signaled to Flynn, who had seen the man as well. He held up a hand. "Wait." The man pulled out a spyglass, scanning the approaches to the ridge. His gaze passed over their hiding places without pausing. Satisfied, he returned to his horse and withdrew something from his saddlebags, a flag, which he tied to a long branch and planted on the highest point of the ridge, the signal for his men to approach. Flynn gave the signal to move in. With practiced coordination, they emerged from cover, weapons trained on the lone figure. "Jackson," Flynn called. "Hands where I can see them." The man spun around, reaching for his pistol. Zara fired a warning shot that kicked up dust inches from his boot. He froze. "Next one goes through your knee," she called out, chambering another round. Slowly, Jackson raised his hands. His eyes darted between them, calculating. "Flynn Thornton," he said with a sneer. "Heard you'd quit the Rangers. Just changed tactics." Flynn approached cautiously, his gun unwavering. "You're under arrest for murder, robbery, and about a dozen other charges." Jackson's eyes found Zara. "You must be the Whitman girl. Survived our little visit, did you?" Rage surged through her. It took every ounce of self-control not to pull the trigger. "Why?" she demanded, her voice raw. "Why our ranch? My parents never hurt anyone." Jackson's laugh was ugly. "Nothing personal, girl, your water rights. That spring on your property feeds half the county in drought years. Worth a fortune to the right buyer." "You killed them for money," Zara said flatly. "Isn't that why anyone kills?" Jackson's eyes narrowed. "You won't take me in, Thornton. My men will be here within the hour." "That's the plan," Flynn said calmly. "Miguel, the flag." Miguel quickly retrieved the signal flag and replaced it with another. They'd brought a seemingly identical flag that would draw Jackson's men into an ambush where Sheriff Dillon and a posse of 20 men waited in the valley below. Zara kept her rifle trained on Jackson as Flynn bound his hands. The outlaw's eyes never left her face. "You think this ends with me?" Jackson taunted. "There's always another gang, another threat. You'll never be safe out here alone, girl." "She's not alone," Flynn said quietly, securing the last knot. "Not anymore." They delivered Jackson to the waiting sheriff, who promised to send word when the rest of the gang was captured. By nightfall, they were back at the Silverbrook, weary but victorious. "It's not over," Zara said as they sat by the fire. "Jackson was right about that." "There will always be another threat." "True," Flynn agreed. "But that's why we have each other now. Partners face threats together." Zara studied his face in the firelight. In just a few days, this man had become someone she trusted with her life. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "Partners," she echoed softly. 2 weeks later, a messenger brought news. The Crosshair gang had been decimated. Most were in custody, the rest scattered to the winds. Jackson himself was awaiting trial in the territorial prison, facing the gallows for multiple murders. The rebuilding of the Silverbrook Ranch began in earnest. Flynn brought in lumber and supplies, hired additional hands. Zara worked alongside them all, directing operations with a newfound confidence. Each evening, she and Flynn would sit on the porch of the partially rebuilt main house, discussing the day's progress and plans for the future. Somewhere along the way, Mr. Thornton and Miss Whitman had given way to Flynn and Zara, and the distance between them on the porch bench grew smaller. "The cattle drive to Fort Worth is set for next month," Flynn said one evening as they watched the sunset. "Combined herds from both ranches should fetch a good price." "Enough to pay off the bank and have capital left over," Zara agreed. She hesitated. "Flynn, there's something I've been wanting to ask you. Anything. Why did you really come here? The truth." Flynn was silent for a long moment. "I told you about tracking the Crosshair gang. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth." Zara waited, sensing his struggle. "When I read the report about the raid on your ranch, about you surviving, something struck me." Flynn looked down at his hands. "My sister didn't survive when raiders hit our ranch during the war. She was 16. I was away fighting, couldn't protect her or my mother." Zara's breath caught. "I'm so sorry. For years I tracked down men like that, brought them to justice, but it never filled the hole inside." Flynn's eyes met hers. "When I heard about you staying on, fighting to keep your land despite everything, I had to meet the woman with that kind of courage." "It wasn't courage," Zara said softly. "It was stubbornness and fear. I didn't know where else to go." "That's what courage is, Zara. Doing what needs doing, even when you're afraid." Flynn's hand found hers on the bench between them. "You inspired me before I ever met you, and now that I know you." His voice trailed off, but his eyes said what words couldn't. Zara felt her heart quicken. "Now that you know me," she prompted gently. Instead of answering, Flynn leaned forward slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. But Zara found herself meeting him halfway, her eyes closing as their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home after a long, difficult journey. When they parted, Flynn's hand cradled her cheek. "I didn't plan on this, Zara Whitman. Didn't expect to find something more valuable than justice or land or cattle." "And what did you find?" she whispered. "A partner. In every sense of the word, if you'll have me." Zara looked into his eyes and saw a future she hadn't dared imagine since the night her world burned down around her. A future with someone who saw her strength, not her scars, who valued her as an equal, not a possession. "I will," she said simply. 6 months later, the Silverbrook main house stood complete, larger and sturdier than before. The combined herds of the Silverbrook and Triple T grazed across expanded pastures, with a dozen hands employed to manage them. On a perfect autumn day, with wildflowers dotting the prairie and a gentle breeze stirring the grass. Zara Whitman became Zara Thornton in a ceremony attended by friends from miles around. Sheriff Dillon himself came to offer congratulations, bringing news that Jackson had faced the justice he deserved. That evening, as husband and wife stood on the porch of their home, Flynn wrapped his arms around Zara from behind, holding her close as they watched the stars appear. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "More than I ever thought possible," she admitted. "There were days I didn't think I'd survive, let alone find joy again." Flynn turned her gently to face him. "You are the strongest person I've ever known, Zara Thornton. Never forget that." "With you reminding me daily, how could I?" she teased, though her eyes shone with emotion. "That's my solemn duty as your husband," Flynn promised, drawing her close. "To remind you every day of your strength, your courage, your beauty." "And my duty?" Zara asked, her hands sliding up his chest. "To be exactly who you are," Flynn said simply. "The woman I love with all my heart." As his lips found hers once more, Zara marveled at how life could change. From the ashes of devastation, she had found not just survival but rebirth. Not just a partnership, but a love deeper than she had ever imagined possible. The broken places within her hadn't disappeared. They never would entirely, but they had been mended with gold, like the Japanese pottery Flynn had once described to her. Stronger at the joins, more beautiful for having been shattered and remade. 2 years later, the Thornton Ranch, as the combined properties had come to be known, was thriving. Flynn and Zara had established one of the most successful cattle operations in the county, their partnership in business as seamless as their partnership in life. On a bright spring morning, Zara stood on the porch of their home, watching as Flynn taught their 1-year-old daughter, Emma, to pet a gentle mare. The child's delighted laughter carried on the breeze, a sound that still amazed Zara each time she heard it. Their son, James, kicked within her growing belly, a reminder of the new life that would join their family in just a few months. Zara placed a hand on her stomach, smiling as Flynn looked up and caught her eye, his face lighting with love. This land that had seen so much heartbreak had become the foundation for a legacy of love and strength. The nightmares that once plagued Zara's sleep had faded to rare occurrences. In their place were dreams of the future, a future bright with possibility. As Flynn approached with Emma in his arms, Zara thought of how far they had come. From strangers bound by circumstance to partners in every sense. From broken survivors to creators of something new and beautiful. "What are you thinking about, looking so serious?" Flynn asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. Zara smiled, taking Emma into her arms as the little girl reached for her mother. "Just that some broken things aren't ruined. They're just waiting to be rebuilt into something stronger." Flynn's arm encircled her waist, drawing her and their daughter close. "And you, Zara Thornton, are the strongest woman I know." This time she believed him completely.